Hey everybody, Todd Nash, President of the Oregon Cattlemen's Association. I'm here today with my son, James Nash. And James, you want to further introduce yourself, a little bit about who you are, where you're from, what you do?
Sure. Thank you for having me. Like you said, my name's James, and I live on the Six Ranch, which is on my mom's side. It's a ranch that is now six generations deep. We were founded in 1884. I grew up here, and then I went to college in Dillon, Montana, studied literature and writing. After that, I went into the Marine Corps, where I was a tank officer, and I served for 5 years there. And I was deployed to Afghanistan, where I was wounded a couple times, and afterwards went through a process and became medically retired. After that, I came home and I started an outfitting business, and that grew. And I also started the Six Ranch podcast, which is also done well. So basically, I manage the natural resources and the wildlife management and conservation here on the Six Ranch. I host the podcast. I do a lot of brand ambassador work for different brands within the outdoor and hunting industries. And I still outfit and guide hunting and fishing. And then I write about those things as well, and I'm published every month. So I've got a lot of different jobs, but most of them work within one way or another of hunting, fishing, or ranching.
Okay. Well, for the purposes of today, we're coming up on Veterans Day, and so I thought that I would get a veteran on here and one that I'm a little bit familiar with. But James, Veterans Day coincides with the Marine birthday. And
Yes,
so
it does.
how many years? How many years now?
Well, the Marine Corps was founded in a bar called Tun Tavern in Philadelphia on November 10th, 1775. So the Marine Corps is older than America, and it was originally founded to fight pirates. And there was a lot of piracy going on coming out of Africa, and the Barbary pirates were sort of the first conflict that the Marines had to engage. And we're awfully proud of ourselves, Marines are, and something that is interesting, I guess, between Marines and the other service branches is you'll hear that, once a Marine, always a Marine. You'll never hear somebody say, well, I'm a former Marine. That's not a thing. You're just a Marine, whether you're active duty or not. And that's something that you carry forever. And when we're talking about veterans, we're talking about people who have served in the armed forces. And even though that's a past tense by nature, you can be a Marine and you can be a Marine veteran, and that's something that's kind of fun.
Okay. Yeah, we had the privilege last year at the Oregon Cattlemen's Convention to have the 34th Commandant of the Marine Corps speak there, and I had people come up and say afterward that that was one of the most powerful speeches, if not the most powerful speech they'd ever heard in person. And we got to spend a little time with the Commandant. You want to talk about that?
Sure. Well, we're talking about General James Terrence Conway, and he asked me to call him Jim, which is what he goes by, but I cannot for the life of me call a commandant by his first name. But I met him at the Army Navy football game with a gentleman named Mark Reynolds many years ago, and we started talking about hunting, as you might imagine that I would. And he said that he had always wanted to hunt elk. And I said, well, I come from a place where there's elk, and I would love to take you elk hunting. And we ended up putting that trip together and took Mark and General Conway and a couple of their friends elk hunting, and had a terrific adventure. Did not kill an elk, but had a good time trying nonetheless. he had blown up his Achilles not long before that hunt, but still managed to ride and hike around in just some of the steepest country that there is. When I first saw him, he was speaking at an event at Quantico at the basic school. So after officer candidate school, you get commissioned and you're a commissioned officer. And then there's a 6-month long course where every officer in the Marine Corps learns how to be effective as an infantry platoon commander. So every Marine is capable of being a rifleman, whether they're a cook or any other job. And every Marine officer is capable of leading an infantry platoon, although not to the same ability as an infantry platoon commander. But that is training that everybody gets. And at the basic school, I remember General Conway had come down from Washington, D.C. to talk to all of the new second lieutenants. And we're in a big auditorium, and there was a full bird colonel who was running the basic school, and he was organizing where all these lieutenants were going to be sitting in this auditorium. And for a brief moment, he had a little bit of indecision about where he was going to put us. And General Conway was up on the stage, and he said, "Make a decision, Colonel." And that's something that we'd been hearing as lieutenants and as officer candidates, just about every minute of every day was make a decision, candidate, make a decision, lieutenant. And it was so interesting and rewarding to find an officer of the highest possible rank, right? He's one of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and he was going to hold his subordinate, who was a full bird colonel, to the same standard that we were being held to. And that was an example of his leadership that I'll remember forever. And when we were watching him on the stage, I could have swore he was 7 feet tall. And when I actually met him in person and realized that he was of a average stature, although he was incredibly fit, it was interesting to me just how that perception of his presence and his aura made him seem so much larger than life. And he's an incredible human. And anybody that ever gets a chance to hear him speak should absolutely take that opportunity, because they didn't make many like him.
No, and unfortunately, we're not going to have him back this year. And I asked several people who we should have speak again, and they said, "Let's get the commandant out here again." And I wasn't brave enough to ask him to come one more time. He did an incredible job, and his presence was really special to have there. Well, James, I'm going to go back. There's some dates that are ingrained in my head. They're probably ingrained in yours too. July 4th, 2012.
July 4th, 2012, I was sitting on a tarmac in Cherry Point, North Carolina, and actually it was 11:59 on the 3rd, where we were rolling down that tarmac. And just before the wheels of that airplane came off the ground, we switched into the 4th of July, and that was when the Marines of Charlie Company, 2nd Tank Battalion took off to fly to Afghanistan.
Yeah, and that was a pretty challenging time for me. And I don't want to focus on me, but any of the parents that ever seen their kids take off, like that's a rough time. All right, it's a month and 2 days later.
Yep, August 6th, 2012 was our first real combat mission. We'd done combat patrols and things of that nature. We'd ripped out with a unit who was there previous to us. But at that stage, we were all on our own. We took off on a mission called Operation Lion's Den. I think it was Lion's Den 4 or something like that. And we went to an area of Afghanistan called the Land of the Second Sons. And, these were the outcasts of families and outcasts of society who, weren't able to inherit what little their family may have had. And they'd gotten shunted out to this really tough piece of land and they're pretty radical out there, as far as like their religious zeal, and they were very much Taliban. And we went in there with Second Recon to try to interdict and destroy a bunch of heroin, which is how the Taliban funds terrorism and funds war. And during that mission, I got my platoon got hit by a mortar while we were waiting for the day to cool off a little bit. It had gotten up over 130 degrees. It was over 150 degrees inside my tank. And typically fighting doesn't occur in the middle of the day. It's something that happens in morning and evening when it's a little bit more manageable to be able to actually fight. But this was the middle of the day, and we got hit by this mortar when we were outside of the tank, and hit right in the middle of me and my Marines. And it killed my gunner, who was named Corporal Daniel Linneberry, and really badly injured three others, and myself. Although my injuries were the least of everybody's. And then there was also Marines that were well within that blast radius who did not get any shrapnel, who did not get brain injuries from the blast, and for whatever glitch in physics or divine intervention, were able to be protected there. And yeah, that was a pretty tough day and a tough start to a tough deployment. Daniel Linneberry, he just had a daughter about 2 months before that, I think. And fortunately he'd got to spend a little bit of time with her, but that was it. So it is tough for families, whether they're spouses or direct family or friends. That service and sacrifice extends well beyond the actual troop who's on the battlefield. Everyone who cares is involved and feels that blast, whether they're on the ground or not.
I want to talk about another date. So you gave me a phone call. You gave me a phone call after that incident. You gave me another phone call in October, and it was right before you were going to go out again. I had a bull elk tag, and there's elk season going on right now, and I know a lot of hunters that are out there. And I said, if you remember at the time, I said I'm going to wait till you get home, and I'll go hunting with you then. And do you remember what you said?
Oh, I don't remember exactly what I said, but I wanted you to go. And I think that the elk hunting is a thing worth fighting for as much as any other. And yeah, I wanted you to go. I'd planned this mission with Australian Special Forces, and I'd planned all of the tank maneuver on the way to and from this location. And it was a battle at a place called Keshmesh Khan, which I think, unless I quit talking about it, nobody's ever going to hear about Keshmesh Khan. But it had previously turned back an entire Marine battalion, and we went in there with 16 tanks and around 30 Australians, and we ended up taking that objective and destroying about 17 metric tons of heroin, black tar heroin. 17 tons. Think of that. When you can think about how small of a dose of that can destroy somebody's life or kill them there on the streets. And unfortunately, one of those Australian troops stepped on a large IED and was killed. Of the 100 or so Marines in my company, over 30 of them were wounded. About 30% of our company, we destroyed or neutralized more than half of our vehicles. And in the planning for that, I knew that it was going to be tough, and I did not think that I was going to survive that mission. The odds were definitely stacked against us, and I just figured that if I was going to be out, doing this thing that needed to be done, but I sure didn't want to be doing if I could be doing anything else, I would be back home in the canyons elk hunting. And so that's what I wanted you to be doing while I was out there. And fortunately, all the Marines made it back. I made it back. I got hit by a couple IEDs. I got shot by an anti-tank rocket. We had a lot of sniper shooting going on, and it was extremely tough. It was as tough of a mission, I think, as second tanks saw during these wars. And when we got back from all this, we came back in February of 2013, and we had a party, as Marines do, and the lieutenant commander at Second Tanks told us that was the most kinetic tank deployment since World War II. That was the most tank fighting that our unit had seen since World War II. And the company that replaced us, they didn't really go out and fight. There was very little tank fighting that ever occurred after that. And although there was some, but Marines have since gotten rid of tanks. So that was really the peak and the end of the era.
Yeah. And it's concerning too. I know you're concerned about that era and maybe a need for it at some point again. Um, One of the things, James, and we've talked about it a little bit, and I don't know how to associate a lot of these things. We don't have that camaraderie that you do with fellow Marines, with fellow veterans. I never served in the same capacity, and so I don't speak the same language. I don't have the same experiences. But when somebody says, "Thank you for your service," what's the best way that they can approach a veteran?
So, I've never been a big fan of thank you for your service, partially because I don't know how to answer it. It feels inappropriate to say you're welcome, which is usually a very okay thing to say anytime somebody says thank you. So there's some innate awkwardness in how I can respond to that. My preference, by far, and what I recommend to people is if you're around somebody who's a veteran, ask them what branch they were in, ask them what their job was. And you can tell by the answer to that second question whether they want to talk about it more or less. But if they want to talk about it more, then ask some more questions and listen to their story and listen to what they have to say. And then at the end of that, or even if they don't want to talk about it, that's really the time that you can say, thank you for doing that. And if people know what they're being thanked for, it makes a really big difference, and it helps a lot. A lot of the things that I did are things that nobody would ever thank me for if they knew what they were, because there's a lot that goes on in war that's pretty darn horrible, and it still needs to be done, but people would not thank me for those things. So if somebody just comes up and says, hey man, thanks for your service, it feels like you have no idea what you're even saying thank you for. And I wish that wasn't the case. So my advice is just to spend a second getting to know that person, and then say thank you afterwards. And a lot of people get Veterans Day and Memorial Day confused. And on Memorial Day, that's not about veterans, and it's not about active duty. That's about the troops that we lost, the folks that didn't come home. Veterans Day, on the other hand, is about the folks who did come home. And one of the best ways that we can support veterans is by getting them together on those days. Because just like you said, it's really difficult to understand, and you don't have that camaraderie that veterans have with each other. So that's one of the best ways that you could possibly support veterans is finding ways to get them together on Veterans Day. We had a big group of local vets here a couple of years ago on Veterans Day who were going to go down to the VFW hall. And when we started to go down there on Veterans Day, we walked up to the door and they had it closed because there's a bunch of elderly women who are quilting in there. And it just felt crazy to me that on that one day of the year that the VFW would not be open to veterans. So, you know, we all ended up going down to the Range Rider instead and had a great evening, and that was all fine. But I think that's exactly the type of thing that we should try to prevent from happening. Like don't get in the way of veterans getting together, and if you can do something to enable it, then Veterans Day is a great way to do that.
Hey, James, one of the things that I pack away with and take more serious than what I did prior to you and Josh's deployment was the rights that our forefathers fought for, the rights that you fought for, um, those basic rights to for freedom of speech, to go where we please, to pursue happiness. Um, they're they're so much more important to me now because the realization of how they're won and lost and what they look like in other countries. Um, it really troubles me when I see somebody from an agency that is told by their superiors that they don't have the right to an opinion anymore, and aren't free to speak. Um, do you want to talk about that? How important it is for us to live freely and pursue happiness?
Yeah, you know, we we roll stuff out like saying, freedom isn't free, and that's easy and kitschy to say, but you kind of have to think about these little microcosms of scenarios, and then take this day on August 6th. I'm hurt myself. I've got three troops there who are missing limbs or are about to be, uh, and then I've got my gunner who is dying quickly, and I don't even have the time to hold on to him while he does that, because I've got to try to keep these other guys alive. And you expand that over the millions of U.S. troops who have lost their lives since the founding of our country, and think of all of that pain and sacrifice and commitment to each other and commitment to freedom, and then think about throwing that away because you feel like you might get in trouble at work. uh, it's just it's pretty disappointing, and it can be really hard to come back and see the ideal that you believed in so strongly that you were willing to commit everything to seeing that ideal had a future, and to see it get thrown away or to not get realized. uh that hurts a lot. Um and I don't think that you should hold on to your freedom to prevent the emotional pain of the people who fought for you to have the opportunity. I think you should hold on to it for yourself and for the people who are going to come on, you know, in the future, so that they can have those opportunities. And it is incredibly precious, and it is worth that pain, and it's worth that sacrifice. You just can't let it go. You can't let it go.
And going back to the 25th of October, I do remember what you said. And I said I wasn't going to go elk hunting. I'm going to wait till you come home. And you said, Dad, you're going to go. Because I would do anything right now to be able to go. And so I did. I had a miserable day. I shot a nice big bull, and I packed him out by myself, and I got him right at daylight. And it was about midnight when I got him finally skinned out. And I said I'd never go elk hunting by myself again, but it was cathartic for me to spend my day doing that, and it was really gratifying to be able to share that picture with you when you got out of the battlefield. I remember you saying also you got on the radio and said, "Boys, we're not the only ones shooting today. My dad has an elk tag, and I know that he's shooting." So,
Yep.
yeah.
Yep. No, it would have been nice to have a to have an elk rifle. I would have much rather had that. The gun I was fighting with was so dusty it'd jam up about every second shot. So it would have been pretty nice to have old 25-06 out there. But yeah, no, everybody was shooting, and everybody was shooting for, what is the American dream. And it's a good dream, and it's not gone. And there's plenty of bad that's going on, but there's so much good too. And we've got all the potential in the world. We're set up for success here.
James, we're going to wrap this up. This was a special tribute to veterans. It come out the day before Veterans Day. Is there anything that you want to say to Oregon Cattle members, Cattlemen's members, or people that may be listening in that we haven't covered thus far?
Yep. All I would say is keep doing the work, and understand that when it's looking pretty grim, that if you just keep doing your job, you're going to find that there's a lot of people around you that are doing it too, and are supporting you. And if you can find it to support the people around you that are having a hard time, then you can start to develop those relationships that the folks in the military have, that create that strength that is stronger than anything else that we can find in the world. And I think that you can learn a lot about yourself by considering what other people have gone through, so that you can have those opportunities to struggle and strive for success.
Okay. Well, I really appreciate you getting on here today, talking about some really tough things, but I think it's worthwhile if we're talking about veterans to really know what some of those experiences might be like. And I'm really glad you're home, James.
Thank you. Me too.
All right. Have a good day, and we'll be talking soon.
Okay.